I've heard you talk about supersonic aircraft. You guys have done some beautiful work at SpaceX on VTOL. Clearly, Tesla is focused on electric. Have you thought about the synergies of electric and VTOL and aircraft for solving the 405 challenge?
For solving the 405 problem, well, I mean, I do think there's a
and
really
VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing.
Right. Sorry, vertical takeoff and landing is VTOL, I do think there's a really I think the optimal sort of air transport solution is a VTOL electric supersonic plane, and it actually works together quite well for a bunch of reasons. In particular, the higher you go, the better the more efficient the electric aircraft is. Whereas if you have a combustion aircraft, as you get higher, it tends to get worse because you have a kind of a fixed aperture and
air scoop.
Yeah, like the engine is the hole in the front of the engine is a fixed size, and so you have to pick a particular cruising altitude, and so you've got to figure out how do you get the right amount of air at sea level all the way through really high altitude. And then you've got this issue of supersonic combustion that so you end up having to slow the air down, and it ends up being not that efficient. But an electric aircraft would just get better and better as it got higher. And then electric motors have a higher power to weight ratio than a combustion engine, so you could actually have the power to do the vertical takeoff and landing part with a fairly small motor compared to combustion. And then you could get rid of the elevator and rudder, so you don't need the rear control surfaces if you gimbal the motor.
Gotcha. So it starts to look like a pod craft, like in Oblivion or something.
Right. So it's something not quite. The real trick of it is like how do you make it really long range and at least as safe as existing aircraft. Those are really the only two questions on that front, I think. But they're tricky. They're certainly tricky.
Don't underestimate those two questions.
To have a compelling aircraft, you only really need about 400 watt-hours per kilogram, provided the percentage of cell on the aircraft is high. It doesn't need to be anywhere near as high as it is on a rocket, but if it's sort of at the 70% level at 400 watt-hours per kilogram, you can do very decent range. And if you sort of move it up to the sort of mid to high 70s, you can go transcontinental. Not intercontinental, but sort of west coast to east coast. So you need an efficient aircraft, but that's approximately, by my calculations, the numbers you need: 400 watt-hours per kilogram, mid to high 70s cell mass fraction, which I think is an achievable number. Because aircraft have all these unnecessary things like tails and rudders and elevators. It's not needed. Just gimbal. Gimbal the electric fan. For some weird reason, gimbaling motors is normal in rockets and not in aircraft. Why not?
Okay, well, it definitely plans to get into this business because we love to see how things develop in that particular area. Certainly a very interesting domain. Do you have specific plans?
I mean, I've been sort of toying with the design for an electric supersonic vertical takeoff and landing electric aircraft for a while. At some point, I have a design in mind for an electric supersonic vertical takeoff and landing plane. I don't think there's been that much innovation in airplanes.
Not at all. Some people just travel the emerging world before we tell you not at all. I mean, especially in coach.
Right, exactly. You got the 777 and the 787, and it's these things are very, very incremental. They're 10-15% better than the last version. So I think it would just be worth trying to do something that's several generations beyond the current state of the art. Design in mind, I'm very confident it would work. It's just a question of what sort of range can you achieve, and
and how difficult it will be to achieve the level of reliability that people have come to expect in aviation. Those are really the tough parts. It's not, well, look, definitely make it work.
What are some of the ideas that excite you today? Because there are so many brilliant ideas around the world. How could you keep focused on the things you're doing instead of being distracted by so many other good ideas?
There's a lot of opportunity in electrification of cars, of aircraft, and of boats. And I think there's a particular opportunity for a supersonic vertical takeoff and landing electric jet. That's something I'd love to do at some point in the future if my time allows.
Down the road, I'd love to work on something which is a vertical takeoff and landing supersonic electric jet, and leverage the what I've learned from SpaceX and from Tesla to try to make that happen. I think it's possible to create a much better airplane. That I have a design in mind for a vertical takeoff and landing supersonic electric jet. That kind of combines what I've learned at SpaceX and Tesla, because sort of SpaceX has got the aerospace side of things, and Tesla's got the electric powertrain side. And I think that would be a really cool vehicle to have in the world, because you wouldn't need big runways, and you could get places fast and be relatively quiet, and of course it would be very low cost to operate, and good for the environment and all that. If I were to start another company in the future, which I don't think would be anytime soon, it would be to try to create an aircraft that is a supersonic vertical takeoff and landing electric jet. I think that's sort of the ultimate form of transport, with the exception of what I was mentioning earlier, which is city pairs that are really close together and have a huge amount of traffic between them. That's where the Hyperloop would win on that special case. But in the general case, it's a supersonic vertical takeoff and landing electric plane, because obviously it would have some environmental benefits being electric and be quieter. Supersonic, it would be very fast, and if you fly high enough and have the right geometry of the plane, you can make the sonic boom no louder than current planes. And then the vertical takeoff and landing part would mean that you could land much closer to your destination instead of landing at these huge airports with super long runways. And I think that would really be great. I wish somebody would do that. And so if somebody doesn't do that, maybe at some point in the future I will.
I do think that there's an interesting opportunity to create a supersonic electric vertical takeoff and landing jet. And I think that would be really great.
How far are we from that?
Well, it seems unlikely to come from Boeing or Airbus, given that they seem to be focused on very incremental improvements to the planes as opposed to radical improvements. But it could come from a startup. I mean, if I were to have another company in the future, which would not be anytime soon, I think that would be the thing to do, is to do an electric aircraft.
You want to do an electric aircraft?
Yeah, and supersonic and vertical takeoff and landing actually work well with electric.
I think there's an opportunity to create an electric jet, essentially. And I do think one could create an electric jet that is really exciting, something that would be supersonic, vertical takeoff and landing, pure electric, and just a big leap forward. I think that's a distinct. I'm quite confident it's doable, provided that there's a rough doubling of the energy density in batteries or capacitors. So, basically around the 500 watt-hours per kilogram level is where it starts to make sense.
In order to go really fast with a plane, you have to climb pretty high, because the atmosphere just looks like molasses when you're going fast. So for distances certainly under 500 miles, you spend all your time just ascending and descending, and you don't really get an opportunity to spend time at cruise. So something like the Hyperloop can compete really well in that arena, because you instantly, or almost instantly, enter a low-pressure environment. And so the tube contains a low pressure environment that's, like the cruising altitude of, well, it's like very high altitude atmosphere, basically. And so you don't have to spend any time ascending or descending. So there's no way it would be, well, extremely difficult for a plane to be faster than a Hyperloop for distances under 500 miles, because of that ascent-descent thing. However, once you get to long distances, then the cost of the tube starts to become a big factor. And so then I'd say it's probably the right move is to go to supersonic transport, because then you're spending a large percentage of your time at cruise. And you could probably get there faster with a supersonic